The federal courthouse in downtown Washington buzzed with tension. The streets outside were lined with protesters, news vans, security barricades, and eager reporters hoping to catch a glimpse of the man at the center of the storm, Elon Musk. Inside, the courtroom was standing room only. A swarm of cameras had been denied access, but that didn't stop the scene from feeling cinematic. The ceiling fans spun slowly above the dark-paneled courtroom, while whispers rippled through the audience like nervous static. Musk sat calmly at the defendant's table. No lawyer flanked him, no entourage, just a single, unassuming leather briefcase and a stack of loose papers, neatly aligned. On the other side, the lead prosecutor adjusted his mic and smirked. Elon Musk, he said, drawing out the name like a punchline, CEO of multiple companies, billionaire, online provocateur, and today a citizen before this court, not above it. A few quiet laughs echoed in the gallery. Musk didn't move. The judge, an aging appointee with a reputation for enjoying the spotlight, raised an eyebrow. "We're not here to discuss your social media opinions, Mr. Musk," she said. "We're here to examine whether your actions in recent months violated federal protocol regarding speech, influence, and interstate digital engagement." Translation: he'd tweeted things they didn't like. He'd made statements that challenged federal narratives about AI, about censorship, about free speech. And now he was in court, not for breaking a law, but for breaking a mold. The prosecutor leaned in. "You've refused to comply with multiple advisory rulings. You've questioned the authority of regulatory agencies. You've implied that you decide what speech is protected." Another smirk. "So tell us, Mr. Musk, who do you think you are? The Supreme Court?" The gallery chuckled again. One camera phone clicked silently. Elon finally spoke, calm, unshaken. "I think I'm a citizen of the United States," he said, "where the First Amendment still applies." The judge sighed. "This isn't Twitter, Mr. Musk. You're not trending here." Elon reached into his briefcase, pulled out a small folded document, and carefully laid it on the table. It was a copy of the U.S. Constitution. The room fell still. Musk looked up, eyes locked with the judge's. "Then maybe it's time someone reminded you what's in it." The courtroom had gone silent, not out of respect, but confusion. Who, in this age of soundbites and settlements, pulls out a printed constitution and means it? The judge stared at the document like it was a prop. "Elon," she said, her voice brittle with disbelief, "this is not a civics class." "No," he replied, standing now, his hands steady as he unfolded the worn parchment copy on the table before him. "It's supposed to be a courtroom, a place where rights matter." The prosecutor groaned audibly. "Your Honor, are we seriously allowing this man to quote the law?" Musk interrupted. "Because that's what this is. Not a meme, not a post, the law." He held it up with both hands as if he were swearing in. "Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press." He looked directly at the judge. "You want to know who decides what's protected speech? The founders already did." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The prosecutor stepped forward, visibly irritated. "Mr. Musk, you've used your platform to influence millions, spread disinformation, and openly challenge the credibility of multiple federal agencies. That's not free speech. That's reckless." Elon tilted his head. "It's only called disinformation when it disagrees with your version of the truth." The judge pounded the gavel once. "Mr. Musk, you are on the edge of contempt." "I've been there before," he said, "but you're confusing contempt for courage." Gasps in the gallery. One of the court officers looked up, jaw slack. On the bench, the judge's face flushed with color. "I came here ready to face questions," Musk said, "but what I've heard so far isn't law. It's embarrassment disguised as legal procedure. The government doesn't get to decide which speech is uncomfortable. It only gets to decide whether it's legal." He turned back to the prosecutor. "And last I checked, quoting the Constitution doesn't break federal protocol." The judge's gavel struck harder this time. But the gallery didn't go quiet, because suddenly someone in the back stood up, a young man holding a small copy of the Constitution in his hand, and then another and another. In less than a minute, dozens in the room were on their feet, holding pocket constitutions like protest signs, not chanting, not yelling, just standing. The judge froze. Elon remained still, calm, unshaken, and the camera phones were rolling now, because outside the courtroom, millions were watching. The silence was louder than any protest chant. More than 30 people, young and old, suits and jeans, military vets and students, stood in quiet defiance, holding their pocket-sized constitutions. No signs, no slogans, just paper, just principle. The judge's lips twitched, her gavel hovered mid-air, then dropped with a soft thud. "This is not a rally," she said sharply. "Everyone's seated now." But no one moved. From behind the railing, an older man with a silver beard raised his voice gently. "With all due respect, Your Honor, if a courtroom is where we can't defend the Constitution, then where can we?" The judge froze. Her authority, once absolute in that chamber, now felt brittle. She glanced to the court officers. None moved, not even them, because this wasn't a mob, it wasn't chaos, it was clarity. Elon remained standing beside the defendant's table, the parchment copy still in his hand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even smile. He simply let the weight of the moment rest in the still air. "You brought me here to answer for my words," he said. "Fine, but I won't apologize for using the platform I built to challenge the powers you pretend are unquestionable." He turned to face the crowd. "These people didn't come to chant for me. They stood because they recognize what too many in power have forgotten. The Constitution isn't partisan. It isn't flexible. It's foundational." The prosecutor leaned in, voice tense. "Mr. Musk, you are not a legal scholar." "No," Musk replied. "I'm something more dangerous to you than that." He paused, looked him dead in the eye. "I'm a citizen who reads." The gallery burst into soft clapping, not loud, respectful, restrained, but firm, real. The judge rose, fists clenched at her sides. "Enough. If this continues, I will clear the courtroom." But the threat had no force behind it, because outside the news had broken. Constitution standoff was the #1 trending topic on every platform. Clips of Musk's speech had already been subtitled and translated. Military veterans from 3 wars had posted videos reading the First Amendment aloud. Civics teachers counseled classes and live-streamed the hearing instead. The story was too big now, too real. The court clerk leaned toward the judge and whispered something. Her eyes darted toward the back hallway. Then she exhaled. "We're taking a recess," she said. 15 minutes. She slammed the gavel, but she didn't look up, because for the first time in her courtroom, she wasn't the one in control. The courtroom emptied into the marble hallways in slow, stunned clusters. Reporters scrambled to update live blogs. Staffers whispered into phones. Protesters outside the courthouse held signs reading, "Read before you rule. We the people stand. Free speech isn't a loophole." Inside, Elon Musk didn't step outside or retreat to a green room. He stood in the hallway beside a drinking fountain, quietly speaking to a teenage girl holding a laminated constitution in one hand and a homemade sign in the other. "You flew in for this?" he asked her, genuinely surprised. She nodded. "From Kansas. My brother's a Marine. He said I had to see this with my own eyes." Musk smiled faintly. "Tell your brother we haven't forgotten who the Constitution was written for." She blinked, clearly moved. Meanwhile, in a nearby media room, the prosecutor huddled with federal aides. He was angry now, not because Musk had grandstanded, but because the court of public opinion was slipping from their grip. "He's turning this into a revolution," one aide whispered. "No," the prosecutor growled. "He's turning it into a lesson." Back in the main hallway, several law students approached Musk. "We just wanted to say thank you," one said. "You reminded people law isn't just for lawyers." Musk raised an eyebrow. "Neither is liberty." He wasn't being dramatic. He was being deliberate. Because somewhere in the back of his mind, Elon knew this wasn't just about him. Not anymore. It was about every American who felt that the government had slowly, subtly begun treating freedom as a liability, not a right. So while others planned rebuttals and headlines, Musk made a different decision. He pulled out his phone, not to tweet, to write. By the time court resumed, Elon Musk had printed 5 pages from his phone and handed them to the court reporter. "I'll be reading from this," he said calmly. The judge looked up from the bench. "What is it?" He met her gaze. "My statement, on behalf of the Constitution." The gallery filled back in, phones ready, hearts thudding, because everyone now understood this wasn't going to be a defense. It was going to be a declaration. The gavel fell once more. "Court is back in session." Elon Musk stood before the microphone again. This time, no sarcasm, no smirk, only clarity. In one hand, his folded parchment copy of the Constitution. In the other, 5 typed pages held like a manifesto. "I've been accused of arrogance," he began, "of defying protocol, of weaponizing speech, but let me be clear." He turned to the judge. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to defend you and the rights you swore to uphold." The judge shifted. Musk scanned the room slowly, voice steady. "Freedom of speech does not exist to protect polite opinions. It exists to shield the controversial, the inconvenient, the disruptive. If we only protect what's popular, we don't have liberty. We have permission." Someone in the gallery whispered, "Damn. Twitter, X, Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. These are tools, platforms, machines. But the freedom to speak? That's the soul of the machine." He flipped to page 2. "This government has forgotten something crucial. The Constitution was not written to control the people. It was written to control the government. You do not get to pick which amendments are trending. You do not get to punish dissent because it's loud. You do not get to censor, silence, or shame a citizen into submission." He looked directly at the prosecutor. "You want to prosecute my words, but what happens when it's your words next?" No one laughed this time. Outside, livestream comments exploded. "This is historic. Elon is delivering the modern Gettysburg Address, not a trial, a turning point." Musk flipped to the final page. "If I am guilty of anything, it's of believing that the people still matter, that their voice is still louder than their party, that their rights are not suggestions, and that their freedom of expression is not a bargaining chip." He held up the parchment Constitution again. "This isn't nostalgia. It's a mirror, and if it makes this courtroom uncomfortable, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." He stepped back from the mic. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. Even the judge didn't know what to say. And in that stillness, one fact rang louder than any gavel could. The trial wasn't about Elon anymore. It was about all of us. The moment Musk sat down, the courtroom buzzed, not with applause, but awe. It wasn't just a statement. It was a line drawn in ink and fire. But the prosecution wasn't ready to surrender. The lead attorney stood, smirking with a familiar government confidence. "Your Honor," he said, turning slightly to the gallery as if playing to a jury that didn't exist, "this is a court of law, not a theatre for ideological performance." He turned back to Musk. "Mr. Musk's theatrics are impressive, emotional even. But let's be clear, no one in this courtroom is threatening the Constitution. We're here because he refused compliance, because he challenged government authority in a manner that could undermine public trust." Musk didn't respond. He simply folded the Constitution and laid it gently in front of him. The prosecutor pressed on. "He claims to stand for free speech, but what he really stands for is disruption, chaos, and that makes him dangerous." The words echoed. Dangerous. Not illegal, not traitorous, just dangerous. And for everyone watching, in the room, in classrooms, in living rooms across the nation, it was suddenly clear. They weren't prosecuting Elon Musk for breaking the law. They were prosecuting him for breaking the narrative. Outside the courthouse, the world had moved faster than the court. Thousands now gathered, waving pocket constitutions and holding up phones. Veterans read the Bill of Rights aloud. College students painted the First Amendment on poster boards. Cable networks flipped their coverage. TikTok was flooded with creators stitching clips of Elon's speech with historical footage of Martin Luther King Jr., Ronald Reagan, and Malcolm X. A young black woman posted, "He's not perfect, he's not a saint, but today Elon Musk stood where no CEO, no politician, no influencer has stood in years, on principle." In court, the prosecutor tried to continue, but his voice sounded smaller now, like someone giving closing arguments at a trial that had already escaped the courtroom. The judge glanced down. Her fingers tapped her bench in slow, steady rhythm. Even she could feel it. Control was slipping. Not because of Musk, because of the truth he reminded everyone of. The courtroom had become a paradox. A place designed to interpret the law now felt like it was defending itself against it. The judge, known for being firm, calculated, and never off script, sat unusually still. Her pen hadn't moved in minutes. Her eyes drifted from the bench to the gallery, to the Constitution on Musk's table, to the rows of quiet Americans watching her every blink. She had ruled over hundreds of trials, but she'd never been the one on trial. Not officially, not on paper, but in spirit. The nation was watching her, not Musk. Watching to see if she would punish someone not for a crime. but for quoting the words engraved in the Capitol Rotunda 2 blocks away. The clerk passed her a note. Over 18 million live viewers. The prosecutor noticed her hesitation and tried one last time. Your Honour, I urge the court to hold Mr. Musk accountable before his influence spreads further. He's already weaponized this platform. If we don't respond decisively, we signal that billionaires can override lawful precedent simply by going viral. Musk didn't flinch. He didn't have to, because at that exact moment the courtroom doors swung open and a figure walked in. He was tall, wiry, older, dressed not in a suit but in a worn military uniform jacket, a single medal on the chest. His gait was stiff but dignified. A whisper went through the crowd. Colonel Richard Hayes, Vietnam veteran, Bronze Star. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't a tech investor. He was a citizen. And he walked to the bench. Your Honour, he said softly, may I speak? The judge hesitated. You're not part of this proceeding. No, ma'am, he said, but I've buried 19 brothers who died for that document on Mr. Musk's table. He pointed at the Constitution, and I'll be damned if I watch someone punished for reading it. The room held its breath. He turned to Musk. I didn't come here to defend Elon Musk. I came to defend what I once carried into battle sewn inside my jacket. His voice shook now. We the people. The judge closed her eyes, because what had started as a courtroom hearing was now a reckoning. The judge looked like a woman standing in a collapsing house, calm on the outside, but she knew the foundation had shifted. Colonel Hayes's words hadn't been loud, but they carried the weight of sacrifice, of cemeteries and service, of a quiet America no one interviewed anymore, until now. She tried to respond. Sir, with all due respect, this court. But her voice was cut off, not by yelling, not by Musk, by something outside, the sound of singing. From the open windows at the back of the courtroom, a low chorus drifted in, voices, hundreds strong, then thousands, singing the national anthem just outside the courthouse steps. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? The judge turned to the bailiff. He looked at her, eyes wide. They're all singing. Veterans, students, nurses, truckers, all of them. The courtroom fell still. Even the prosecutor sat down, because the system they thought they were protecting had shown up, but not in uniforms or titles. It came in the form of a people, united by a document that belonged to them, not to the state. Musk remained seated, hands folded. He hadn't tweeted. He hadn't grandstanded. And yet everything had changed. The judge finally spoke. Mr. Musk, she said, voice soft, I don't agree with your tone or your methods, but I cannot ignore what this has become. She paused. I also cannot punish you for invoking the document that gives this court its very authority. A collective inhale swept through the gallery. The charges against you, she said, are hereby dismissed. Gasp, a few claps, then dozens, then all. Elon didn't smile, he didn't even nod. He simply turned to the colonel and whispered, Thank you, sir. And Colonel Hayes replied, Thank you for reminding them what we fought for. Outside, the anthem ended, but the crowd didn't chant. They didn't riot. They stood, peacefully, because now they felt like owners of their freedom again. News didn't just break, it erupted. Elon Musk case dismissed after quoting Constitution in courtroom showdown. Judge overwhelmed by public reaction. Constitution holds. Veterans, students sing outside courthouse after free speech victory. Clips of Elon's speech were being shown on every network, not just conservative, not just independent. Even anchors who once scoffed at Musk now asked questions on air they would have never dared a week earlier. What happens when quoting the Constitution becomes controversial? Have we forgotten what rights are actually for? Do billionaires have more speech, or are they just the ones willing to use it? In a high school classroom in Cincinnati, a teacher tossed the day's lesson plan and printed out Musk's speech instead. This, she said, is how you use your voice. In a living room in Arizona, a 72-year-old Vietnam vet cried quietly as his granddaughter read the First Amendment out loud for the first time in her life. And on a podcast that had never once covered politics, the host opened the show with a single sentence. I didn't like Elon Musk until yesterday. Meanwhile, back at SpaceX, Elon returned to work like it was any other day. No press conference, no tweet storm. Just a short memo to employees. We didn't build rockets because it was safe. We built them because the impossible is what America was made to chase. Free speech isn't a slogan, it's the launch pad. In the weeks that followed, something rare happened. Colleges invited veterans to guest lecture on the Constitution. Congressional hearings paused to quote Elon's Courtroom remarks, and Google searches for First Amendment hit a 20-year high. People weren't just watching anymore. They were learning. And perhaps for the first time in years, they were remembering that the most powerful thing in America wasn't a platform, a politician, or a billionaire. It was a piece of paper, 234 years old, and the people who refused to let it burn. Weeks later, the courtroom was quiet again. The protests were gone. The media trucks had moved on. But something had stayed. On the judge's desk, where verdicts once lived, now rested a small framed document. Not a legal brief, not a court ruling, a folded parchment copy of the U.S. Constitution. Below it, a brass plaque. In this courtroom, on a quiet afternoon in 2025, the First Amendment spoke louder than any gavel. The judge didn't talk about that day anymore. She didn't have to, because its echo had traveled far beyond her jurisdiction. At a tech conference in Austin, Elon Musk was asked by a young entrepreneur, "What was going through your head that day in court?" Elon paused, then smiled faintly. "Honestly, I thought I might lose, but I also knew if I didn't stand for something that day, I might never look my kids in the eye again and tell them they live in a free country." He leaned forward, voice lower now. "Freedom doesn't die in a war. It dies when good people stay quiet in rooms they were meant to speak up in." The audience stood. Not for a CEO, not for a billionaire, but for a citizen who had done the unthinkable. He reminded them that the Constitution still belonged to them. And in a small home in Michigan, Colonel Hayes sat on his porch watching the sunset with a framed article in his lap. He chuckled. "Still can't believe it was Elon Musk," he muttered to himself. His grandson looked up. "What do you mean?" Hayes grinned. "Thought it'd be a politician, a judge, a president." He looked out over the lawn, peaceful and bright. "But I guess sometimes the torch gets passed to the strangest hands, and they hold it high enough that everyone else finally sees it again." Because in a courtroom designed to silence him, Elon Musk didn't raise his voice. He raised the Constitution. And the country, for a brief, beautiful moment, remembered how to listen.